Welcome, boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about Archaon, the Ever-Chosen, and the Warriors of Chaos. And they're quite broken at the moment in the game, because this is how Creative Assembly does things. They release a patch, a major patch, they then release hotfixes, and they think they're fixing issues. But then they break various things in the game even further. It's almost routine at this point. Hopefully the community bug fix mod will at least resolve this specific issue. So for instance, the major problem that Warriors of Chaos right now have, I think after the release of the Titan's Torment DLC, is that they're supposed to be able to subjugate factions. You reduce a faction to its last element, and then when you take it over, or you attack it, even if you sack it, which I did here, you're supposed to be able to subjugate the faction. And yes, this does apply to Borosursus. This subjugation doesn't work. Now, originally, when I started this campaign, to record this video actually, I just thought, okay, so it's an issue with Archaon and Borosursus. But then I checked for other people, and they're saying minor factions don't work, chaos factions don't work. So for instance, Be'lakor starts at war with a minor siege faction over here in Albion. And you've been able to vassalize that faction or subjugate that faction since Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires has come out. You can't do that anymore. That is a bug, and that's how Creative Assembly just does things. Of course, the problem with subjugations is, and just in general with the vassalization system that Warriors of Chaos have, is if you make it only work for chaos factions, then congrats, you're going to spend your entire campaign fighting chaos as someone like Archaon. If you do put order-tied factions, it's kind of ridiculous, because on the flip side, then you just have Archaon controlling the entire Empire, Kislev, and other factions. And that's not even getting into the idea that you can just pull off vassalization through regular diplomacy, which, given the fact Archaon gets a diplomatic benefit for every single faction he vassalizes, it's ending up in a situation where you don't even play a campaign properly, you're not conquering territory. What you do, for instance, with Daniel, is you take the Crystal Spires and you just sell it to him as a Dark Fortress after you build some kind of barracks. You do the same with Epidemius, you do the same with Malice Arcblade, or you might need to take more settlements, and so on and so forth. That is not a campaign, really. Hell, you can even vassalize factions through pure diplomacy, really, and that is not a joke. For instance, this specific faction of Ogres, I just declare war on their initial enemies, the Dissenters, Lords of Jinshan, and I can just get a vassal agreement right here. And yes, that is ridiculous. The fact that these guys even start at war with the Dissenter Lords has kind of rubbed me the wrong way. The reason these guys start at war with the Dissenter Lords is because they started at war with them before the release of Omens of Destruction, and Creative Assembly never bothered to patch that out, even though they changed the location of this faction to create an initial enemy for Arbaal. CA's special sauce, if you will. You can just pull it off for regular diplomacy. So for instance, over there, I have the Howling Citadel as the Dark Fortress, and I can just do a vassalization agreement with Borosursus. So much for the Tsar of Kislev, who is responsible for it being able to survive as long as they did. Warriors of Chaos don't have regular barracks, but it still counts as a barracks for diplomacy, the tribal garrison. So over here, I just took the Riding Fortress, then rushed over here for the Monolith against the Minor Khorne faction. And hilariously, when I took this territory, it spawned this Tong faction. And so now I have a minor vassal that has no territory, and they're just going to be wiped out, not that I care. And then I can just give this settlement to Borosursus, and voila, vassalization. And funnily enough, I'm kind of incentivized to actually fight Kislev as Archaon. I'm not, no, to fight for Kislev as Archaon, because I can, when you defeat the Demon Prince, the defeat trait you get is plus diplomatic relations with Kislev. So I don't even need to trade territory to Kislev. I just need to beat up the Demon Prince several times, and then they will literally, Kislev will literally join me willingly. That is ridiculous. I wonder if confederations for Warriors of Chaos are also broken at this point. because you have the way you confederate is you take their last element and then you have forced confederation. So that's an interesting question. Also, you never could subjugate Daniel or the Demon Prince by taking his last territory. That was always the weird aspect because he does count as his own race. So yes, Creative Assembly does things like this. They leave things unresolved for a very, very long period of time. They never improve them, and then they release a major patch that breaks things even further. Okay, so that's one of the issues that Warriors of Chaos needs resolved, and Archaon needs resolved. But another problem with Archaon, beyond the dynamics that you end up having in your campaign in terms of territory you're taking, is also the fact that as you are playing the Everchosen, you would think Archaon would be really good at playing for the favor of the gods. He's not. So the way Archaon works is he gets an extra undivided gift of undivided gift. That sounds great until you realize he's missing out he's missing out the monogod gifts from the beginning of his campaign. On the flip side, Be'lakor, who by the way doesn't need you to even own the Warriors of Chaos DLC race pack, he starts with one gift of each Chaos God unlocked from the beginning. So Archaon is more of a slow build, but on the flip side, not really, because even with the idea of a slow build, Be'lakor is just flat out better. You might think you gain souls per vassal, but 25 is whatever per vassal. You need to have a lot of vassals, so enjoy being incentivized to keep playing the vassal system and to constantly have to go over here and just give orders for your factions or playing allegiance to actually get them to do anything. And yes, that is a bad system. It's been a bad system. It's been one of the problems. Now, another problem that comes out of this by having those limited gifts of chaos, and it is an issue for every Warriors of Chaos campaign except Be'lakor and Festus, is how Dark Fortresses work. Because you see, Dark Fortresses only have the growth inherent to the structure. A lot of the growth that we get in settlements comes from the principal settlement buildings of the settlements you control. Now, you can take outposts, but those don't give you growth. So your growth is slower as Warriors of Chaos. Now, it doesn't quite matter as much, except it does, because it's different buildings. Your economy, not really that important from it. But it is things like, just being able to get to tier 3, really, to unlock certain things like, getting a chance to recruit Chaos Knights with Warband upgrades, all that kind of stuff, right? That can be an issue. The fact that we are actually missing a lot of Warriors of Chaos units. Like, for instance, maybe at tier 4, you should just get chosen in local Warband unit capacity, as opposed to just like, oh, yeah, you can recruit Marauders, who no one cares about, really. It means that Warriors of Chaos actually ends up being disincentivized from using the actual Warriors of Chaos. You're incentivized to use things like Chaos Trolls, Armor Chaos Trolls, Cav Monsters, etc. Unless you're playing Nurgle. Now, the reason I say Nurgle is because beyond the buildings themselves and what they don't offer, Nurgle has better growth. Or specifically, a gift of Nurgle gives you more growth. So one of the gifts gives you 75 growth or 70 growth per battle faction wide. That is a significant amount of growth. It's not obviously permanent, but it is a lot of growth. So that means when you're playing Be'lakor, who does have access to it from turn 1, or you're playing Festus, you can actually grow your Dark Fortresses much faster. Archaon, the so-called champion, the bringer of the end times, is a lesser legendary lord compared to everyone else, compared to others. I mean, he's better than Kolek, but that's not really saying much. And besides, Kolek has his own advantages. So that ends up being a problem. His quest battles also are very outdated. They're Warhammer 1 quest battles, and they're also kind of annoying. Like, for instance, this first one. Look at the army that I'm dealing with. Warriors of Chaos, Kel Cannons, Chaos Knights, etc. I can probably win it, but it's just better to wait until I can convert these Marauders to Warriors of Chaos. Also, if you do end up recruiting, if you do end up recruiting various things, it's, it can be a bit annoying. Chosen are locked behind technology. Specific Chaos God units are locked behind the marks over here, and it does take quite a few turns right here. Like, this is already turn 7, so it's 14 turns to just unlock specific unit types, and then even further. So these things should not take this much time. It should be a choice. It should be an active choice from the beginning, as opposed to locking these things. Like, if you want to specialize a bit, sure, but maybe the specialization should only be available to the monogods, and Archaon should be really trying to balancing out between the various Chaos Gods. He's not really balancing it out. You might think he does, but really, that's just early on. Eventually, he just has everything unlocked from every Chaos God, but by the point he does, it's irrelevant. Whereas, when we look at the lore of Chaos, it's not just a one-off thing. It's a constant, continuous balance that undivided has to always play between the various Chaos Gods to kind of keep all of them happy, if you want to take that view, I suppose. Yes, basically Archaon and Abaddon and 40k always constantly balance out the various Chaos Gods, and also, you know, Iron Warriors, etc. So that's another aspect. I would also say that the Warband recruitment system is fairly mediocre as a recruitment system, or as the principal recruitment system. I could see it as a nice benefit. Maybe you don't have global recruitment, but you have Warband recruitment, and you can do it in hostile territory, dependent on Chaos, but you should just have regular recruitment. You should just be able to recruit chosen Warriors of Chaos. But again, they could just use this as a supplement and not have global recruitment for Warriors of Chaos, so you are encouraged to engage in it. I think the Warband recruitment system is not the way they should have done this. On the flip side, I will have to state very clearly that my perspective on this is when you're looking at specific, when you're looking at the Warband upgrade system, that is a very different state of affairs. I think the Warband upgrade system is a really great one, but the combination of these two, adding to the fact that you have a faction that cannot regularly recruit units, has a lot of regiments renown, you end up having fewer armies, and the fact that you don't really have a big economy, it just ends up limiting you even further. I'll give a contrast between Abaddon. I mean, he kind of feels like Abaddon at this point. It's like, Abaddon the failure. That's what Archaon is right now. And that's a disservice to his character, because Abaddon has always gotten, Archaon has always gotten shit done to an extent or another, even if he was a bit of a Marisu. But think of Arbaal's campaign dynamic. You look at Arbaal. He gets shit done. He just recruits units. He can have a lot of armies. And that's because even though Khorne doesn't necessarily hold as many settlements, and Khorne certainly doesn't benefit economically from the settlements they hold, the fact is, the way the Khorne economy functions does heavily favor Khorne going out there with quite a few armies, elite ones too, and constantly relying on Baal in order to keep the momentum going. They do have limited recruitment slots, so you do have to keep that in mind. So your armies individually are still valuable, but at least you're not as limited. And on top of that, one of the final things I would also state on the Warriors of Chaos is this constant path of glory. So the idea that you're managing every army, every hero, to decide which god you're going to favor, and you're having to micromanage traits, you're having to manage the boons of chaos. It just creates a constant dynamic of you're not really playing a campaign, you're more so playing against menus. So you're looking at things like vassalization and orders for vassalization through a legion system. You're looking at the path of glory. You're looking at dedicating units. You're looking at ensuring that authority of an army is high enough. So again, Warriors of Chaos are a very strong race, but every single one of these systems, the Boons of Chaos, the Research Tree, their limited settlements, the Vassal system, everything, and more, of course, everything, when you put it as a complete picture, just makes their campaign tedious. Total War is many things. Where Total War is great is when the incentive structure of playing a campaign favors people going out there and getting stuff done. Where Total War has always failed is when it's pushed campaigns and races and characters where it's less about going out there and doing stuff that's fun, battles, conquering territory, and more about management, micromanagement. And It's not even good management. There were choices and decisions and interesting things going on. But no, having to constantly keep an eye on meters just so everything is up in shape. Sure, to some extent, you may not care about these things, but that is kind of the point I'm making is about incentive structure. Incentive structure always dictates how things ultimately play out. If you're incentivizing a player to go through menus and spend a lot of time in them and doing that, that's what they're going to do. As opposed to, like, again, I look at Arbaal, which is why it's an amazing campaign. You know what you're incentivized to do in Arbaal? Not lose battles and defeat everyone in your path. And funnily enough, Arbaal may not be able to subjugate factions through diplomacy, but you can certainly make diplomacy work. And honestly, I think it's a better system because you don't herd minor vassals. You are encouraged, actually, because you can't subjugate and you don't get vassals through, capturing some territories. You're actually encouraged to, in an Arbaal campaign, to take territory or decide, am I going to burn everything to the ground, or can I take territory and then sell it to a faction to make a super vassal, like Gremgor? And that's a lot more fun and better as a system. So even within the constraints of how Warhammer 3 works at the moment, there are better ways of campaign. But what I'm trying to say here ultimately is that Warriors of Chaos were reworked 3 years ago, or over 3 years ago, 3 years and a half we're getting to. And they do desperately need a further improvement and better campaign systems to work in a better fashion. Senior signing out. Stay tuned for more.